It's time to talk sports. It's Hacksaw's Headlines, a panorama of the world of sports, stories, comments, and opinions. Now, here's iconic sports talk show host Lee Hacksaw Hamilton and co-host John Riley.
Who wants sports on a Thursday? We do. From the DIXIELINE Lumber and Home Center Studios in San Diego, we welcome you to Hacksaw's Headlines, our Thursday podcast going towards our great sports weekend. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Lee Hacksaw Hamilton, along with my co-host, John Riley, who's located back in San Diego. Full disclosure, this podcast brought to you by DIXIELINE Lumber and Home Centers, 9 stores to serve you in San Diego, and by North County Eye Center, Poway and Escondido, where right now they're offering all of our viewers a free eye exam. Call and make an appointment and tell them Hacksaw sent you. The words full disclosure. John Riley, you had the gall to go on vacation to Ireland. You had the audacity to co-host on a different continent while you're in a pub at the Guinness Brewery in Dublin, Ireland. If you could do that, I could do that. We are broadcasting today from the St. Lawrence Seaway up on the Canadian-New York border. If you can see in the background, you will see boats, you will see barges, you will see ferries. We're going to be here for the next hour to talk sports. We invite you to join us also. John, we have a lot of different things. Let's do a little business first of all. Let's start with Fans Forum. For everybody that's joining us right now on our podcast, how does Fans Forum work? How can they join us on this 2-state, 2-country podcast we're doing today?
Yeah, so this is your chance to get involved. If you have a question or comment for Lee, type it in the live chat on Facebook, X, or YouTube. We'll get you involved in Fans Forum at the conclusion of Hacksaw's Headlines.
And a reminder, X marks the spot. I'm looking to add more followers to X, aka Twitter. I just want you to join us so you'll know every time I put something up on X. How do you join? Just hit the follow button at Hacksaw1090, at Hacksaw1090, at Hacksaw1090. And a reminder, if you love sports, check my website. It's written every day. It's LeeHacksawHamilton.com. Today, a complete summary of the first day of the NBA Draft, a preview of the National Hockey League Draft, and a ton of other topics on the table. And while you're there, register to join Hacksaw's Insiders Group so you can be a member. You'll get the alerts to everything that we're doing with our YouTube channel. Every time we put something up, you will get the alert. John, we got a ton of topics on the table. There's been an unbelievably busy 48 hours. Let's hit the floor running, or in my case, standing right next to the St. Lawrence Seaway. Don't want to fall into the water, but go ahead. Where do you want to start?
Yeah, there's a lot of action going on over your shoulder there, Lee. But yeah, let's kick it off with the Padres. They swept the Nationals. There was a lot of emotion in that series.
Tell you what a phenomenal week of baseball we've seen out at Petco Park. Padres have won 7 of their last 8. Now, some of that's got to do with playing the woebegone Oakland A's and playing the rebuilding Washington Nationals. I just fascinated to see how hot this team has gotten, despite who they're hitting all these home runs against. But I'll also tell you, they're not gaining any ground on the Dodgers, and that's disappointing because you win 7 of 8, you'd think you'd make up lost ground. They're still 8.5 back, and now the Padres have gone out, and they start this big road trip in Boston, then they go to Texas, then they come home, but then they got 9 in a row on the road against first-place teams like Cleveland, like the Dodgers, and the very good Baltimore Orioles. But I'm just fascinated with what's gone on. Jurickson Profar has been hitting. Not a power hitter over the course of his career, but man, is he hot like a firecracker right now. Profar is hitting .324 since April the 30th. Think about that, .324. And of course, Jake Cronenworth has hit the long ball. Jake has done a much better job this year than last year. He goes out on this road trip hitting .264. Merrill, the kid, is hitting .284, and of course has had 7 home runs in about a week's span. Luis Arraez has cooled off. This is kind of a stunning statistic, John. He's hitting only .232 for the month of June after hitting .389 in the month of May. But he swings at everything, and I'm sure these hits are going to start to fall. Obviously, the injury situation with Fernando Tatis, I'm not going to say they misdiagnosed him. It's just an issue where he had two different injuries. One of the injuries, the stress fracture in the thigh bone, was tough to locate. He's going to be out. And, at one point they were thinking 6 weeks. Now they're talking maybe 12 to 14 weeks. It may well be well beyond the All-Star game. There is some good news as it relates to Joe Musgrove. He now did a 120 feet long toss after throwing with a weighted ball. There's been no setbacks at this point in time. The bad news, Yu Darvish has inflammation in the elbow, which is going to shut him down. Let's talk for just a second about the incident. Part of me says Profar is excitable. That's his persona, John. Part of me says he rounded third base and jumping for joy. He did stare and glare into the dugout. And I think he just needed a cause. And the cause was, oh, you walked the guy in front of me in the batting order to load the bases so you could get me out. Take that. What he did, he hit the grand slam home run. So in a sense, I think he taunted. Obviously, what happened at home plate the next day as he came to lead off the game, I thought Kyrie Ruiz was really wrong for putting his hand on him, although he didn't shove him. He just patted his shoulder as he was talking to him. Profar took exception to that. Machado comes from the on-deck circle, and he actually grabbed Ruiz, which everybody saw, the yank, and that triggered, obviously, the bench clearing incident and everybody, getting angry at the other guy. And then of course, the warnings were issued to both sides, and bingo, the first pitch from Mackenzie Gore hits Profar on the foot. It was a sidewinder pitch that broke in. I don't think there was any intent for Mackenzie Gore to nick Profar, and boom, everybody got upset. Mike Schilt got ejected. He wanted Mackenzie Gore to get ejected. And the very first pitch to Machado, he plants that sucker in the second deck in left field. So it was enormous. It was explosive, etc. Here's the question I was going to pose right at the onset here of our podcast today. Do incidents like this, the come from behind win with Profar the night before, then the explosion the next day, the sweep of the series to the Nationals, can this galvanize a team which has been very erratic and up and down? Can this put the Padres back into the pennant race? Or do we have to hold our breath, John, and just see what happens when they go to Fenway Park, then when they go into Texas, and then when they come home before they go back out on the road for the 9 games? Have they proven anything? Did they do it because they've come together? Have they been galvanized, or did they just hit home runs and get hot against 2 lousy pitching staffs in Oakland and in Washington? John, I threw a lot of high, hard ones at you. So you start with who's hot and who's not, and then whose side are you on as it relates to what we saw with Jerks and Profar and the Washington Nationals?
Well, I just love this series, everything about it. Let's just say right up front, Profar was 100% in the right on everything he did in the 2 games. So that celebration, he has justification for it. And besides these old school rules of, you don't show anyone up, that's like baseball from the 1950s. I mean, we've evolved, the NFL, the NBA, it's all entertainment, showtime value. I love it. The catcher for the Nationals was wrong. Good on Manny for doing a captain move to step in. But then Profar hits, the bomb to win the game. He hits the grand slam yesterday. Kyle Higashioka's hitting bombs left and right. It's been a great run here, but I'm not ready to say that this is the moment. This is the day we can look to, because we've had like 6 or 7 of those over the past 2 months. And then they end up going back into their, tread and water 500 funk. So I'm going to enjoy it, and I'm just going to hope it keeps going.
It's a terrible thing to say, but I'll say it. When Profar went yard, the first words out of my mouth were pointing towards the Washington Nationals dugout. Take that, bitch. Oh, I mean, it was, John, it was electric. And we have seen moments like that in the last group of years at Petco Park, where suddenly it just inflates everything, the fans, the sellouts, and it almost feels like an NFL pro football game in the playoffs. So, hey, they won it. They deserved it. But I guess I do side on your side of the street that they're going to have to prove it. Going to Fenway Park against a Red Sox team now, it's playing much, much better. In Texas, it's never been easy for the Padres to play. So big progress there. We haven't seen much where the whole lineup was intact, and now we have no Tatis. And Manny, at times, looks like he's struggling. And obviously, Arise is in a slump that you hardly ever see that guy struggle with. So, off and running, we'll see what the next road trip brings and whether or not they can close the gap, because the freaking Dodgers are just not going away. Sidebar story on the Dodgers. This story is it's going to be in front and center and being discussed. Dodgers have obviously got significant pitching problems with 10 guys on the disabled list. Now there's a conversation going on as to whether Shohei Ohtani, who's an MVP candidate, should take part in home run derby at the All-Star festivities. He wants to. I've been told the Dodgers are intimating you need to continue to rehab. We don't want you to be in the home run derby. So this is something that's going to be discussed going forward in the next week or so before we get to the All-Star break. So you tell me, what are your thoughts? I mean, Ohtani deserves to be there, but I'll tell you, the home run derby puts enormous stress on a batter's body to try to take as many violent swings in such a short period of time. And the fact that, he's still in recovery from the elbow surgery. Are the Dodgers right for saying, please don't do this, stay in rehab, go to the game and play in the game, just don't be in the derby? Or does Ohtani have the right to say, I want to be in the spotlight because I am in the spotlight?
Well, he is, and the fans want to see him. But I'll say this, as a Padre fan and as a Giant fan, I want Ohtani in the home run derby. I want to see his swing get all jacked up and have him in a slump for part of July so we can gain ground. But the fans definitely want to see these 455-foot bombs. They'd love to have them. I want to roll back, though, to Jurickson Profar, because remember, like 10 years ago, he was the #1 prospect in all of baseball. And then he had the injuries. He never lived up to expectations. But are we now finally seeing the Profar that everyone thought he could be?
Johnny's a lifer. He's a 246 lifer. This is an aberration. Now, I don't know if it's a combination. Maybe he's made some mechanical adjustments to his swing. When you're hitting 324, that's pretty doggone impressive. I kept thinking, well, this is a nice 2-week window, John, but maybe this is going to catch up to him. Maybe they'll start pitching him differently. But no, that's not been the case. He's vibrant. This is not a one-time thing. He's a very different player right now. And then you add into the persona and the vibe and how he just seems to love being in San Diego. He's finally found a home after bouncing around and having not done what everybody expected. So this is pretty impressive.
Yeah, I mean, it's all good. The vibes are great. The vibes above replacement are great. That's a credit out to Divine Sports Gospel. But I just love all of it. So, go Padres, Red Sox, Don Orsillo, homecoming. There'll be a lot to talk about this weekend. Okay.
Hey, if you want to join us, you're a Padre fan, you're a baseball fan, you're a Dodger fan, jump on board. The chat box is open for Fans Forum. When we're done with this podcast, you will get the opportunity to sound off. So sound off of the Padres turn the corner, do incidents like we saw with Washington, galvanize a team and bring them together, or is the jury still out as to how good they can be? We're broadcasting. He's in San Diego. I'm on the St. Lawrence Seaway up near the New York-Canadian border. And by the virtue of greatness of technology, we're able to do this podcast just like we did when he wanted to go drink beer at the Guinness Brewery in Dublin, Ireland. So hope you're enjoying this. Hope you'll stay with us. And so far, so good. NBA Draft, topic 2 on the table. We saw day 1, some surprises. We're waiting to see what happens day 2 in the NBA Draft. John, you watched it. I watched it. Pretty good headline. Some 3-point shots were made, some air balls and some injuries. All that stuff kind of in the conversation.
Yeah, the draft is great, but it's like the United Nations now. I mean, it's a global sport, all these players that are coming, but I love seeing the young kids and their family. So let's break down the first round, Lee.
Yeah, we'll just run through some hot names. The first round fell the way I thought it was going to fall. The French Revolution took place. The 2 big men from France went numbers 1 and number 2. I did not expect 4 players from France to go in the first round, which is an all-time record. I'm going to be intrigued to see what transpires in Atlanta. They had the first pick, and they took Risacher, the 6'7" shooting forward from France. They've got roster issues. They might have a luxury tax issue. There's still this great debate whether they should trade Trae Young or maybe move DeJounte Murray. Lakers have been involved in those trade conversations. But now suddenly you've got a real legitimate stroker of a forward to go with two really good swingman guards. Suddenly Atlanta looks like a very, very different basketball team. So it's going to be fascinating to see. But this kid from France is really ahead of the curve in terms of development. And he's so young and had success playing in the Euro League. Washington at number 2 took the player that we had talked about on Monday in Alex Sarr, 7'1", plays tremendously long. Played in Perth, Australia this year. He initially is from France and also played in the NBA G League for the Ignite team. So this kid has traveled the globe and has made giant strides. Houston at number 3 suddenly looks like a really dangerous franchise. They shopped that pick around. They kept saying we might want to go get a veteran player instead of taking another kid. They couldn't get what they thought they should get in terms of the veteran player and another pick. So instead they took Reed Shepherd, and he's a really fine player. And now you just look at the makeup of the Houston roster, John. Jabari Smith was a star last year. Last year's number 1 pick, Amen Thompson, played well in and around injuries. Al Sungun is a pretty good guy in the paint. And they got a really good coach in Ime Udoka, who came from the Boston Celtics and knows how to coach young guys up and to teach defense, and led them through some peaks and some valleys, but did a really good job. So the top 3 picks are pretty much the way it was projected. San Antonio at 4 got Stephon Castle out of Dan Hurley's team at UConn. He's a really good player. Now, he's really young. They're going to have to work on his offensive game. But I'll tell you what, he's ahead of the curve on defense, and he is really gritty. Detroit really surprised me. I mean, this is a horrid franchise, 14-68 last year. Detroit had the chance to take maybe the other best big man board, and I don't understand them bypassing Donovan Clingan from the University of Connecticut. Granted, they took a guy from the NBA G League, from the Ignite team, Ron Holland, but they needed stability. They needed size. They needed a defender in the paint, because I don't think their centers have been very good. That was the first thing that really surprised me. Clingan wound up falling to Portland, and he goes to a team that desperately needs bigs and is just in the early stages of building. Minnesota made a trade. They got Ron Dillingham from the University of Kentucky. Pretty good acquisition. So you add another firepower guy to a team that's got Anthony Edwards and an awful lot of firepower. So those were real positive picks. Surprise thing to me, Memphis at 9, taking Zach Edey of Purdue, because all the stuff that I had access to, it showed that Zach Edey was dropping on the board because his workouts at the defensive end were really poor. You know, and he's massively big and thick, but his ability to move on pick and rolls, and I just don't know what kind of defense he's going to be able to play. Now, granted, maybe because of his size and his reach, he's going to change the opponent's offenses, and maybe teams are not going to be able to do pick and rolls. So, but I thought 9 was awful high. But Memphis has had a lot of injuries. They've not had Steve Adams for the better part of 2 years. So they needed a big, and maybe with coaching, they'll be able to improve Zach Edey defensively. I thought Sacramento's pick was kind of a surprise. It took Devin Carter, a guard from Providence, and of course they got great guards. I mean, they obviously got De'Aaron Fox, and they got Malik Monk and some other guys. I was a little bit surprised that Sacramento did that. Guys who fell down the board, I think Orlando got a gem. I think the draft into Tristan Da Silva out of Colorado, that's a really good athlete offensively. He's an athlete who's a leaper. He's a guy who can play tough and play big. Denver made a trade at the end of the first round, and they wound up with a guy that I really liked, and we saw him during March Madness, Deron Holmes, power forward, University of Dayton. He's added to the mix, and he's a tough guy. So he's going to give Denver another big body, and he's going to give him a dimension of a banger that maybe Denver doesn't really have. And even though they're not getting a lot of recognition, I thought Utah did really, really well in the draft. They got Cody Williams, 6'9", and then they got Isaiah Collier from USC. So they've gotten themselves some pretty good basketball players. So that's what happened through the first round. The Edey pick, to me, really surprised me more than anything else. John?
Yeah, I mean, I was surprised by that as well. You know, we were talking about a lot of these, I guess, guys that would normally be at the top of the draft board 10, 20 years ago aren't anywhere near the top. And I thought Edey was one of those guys that fell. But Part of the draft that I thought was interesting is just listening to Stephen A. Smith and the ESPN crew breaking all the things down and talking about how the kind of player in the NBA is very different than they were 10, 20 years ago, that they're looking for these guys that are long, athletic, can defend 4 or 5 positions. It almost sounds like the kind of players that Brian Dutcher is trying to recruit at San Diego State.
Well, Dutcher recruits them and then teaches them how to play it. These are accomplished kids. I mean, the level of athleticism that's coming to the NBA draft now, but granted, they're 18 and 19 and 20-year-olds at most. There's hardly any upperclassmen at all that are part of the NBA's first round right now. So the league obviously has changed, but boy, this skill level. I agree with this skill level. It to me is just absolutely phenomenal.
How about John, France? France. We had how many guys came from France?
Well, it obviously started way back in the day with the guards that Greg Popovich took from San Antonio from France. Manu Ginobili and Tony Parker were the first 2 really good players that came from France. And their pro leagues, their teams in the Euro League are really good, and they do develop big men and forwards who can shoot. So it just, it's become a global game. And I'll tell you what, 2 years from now, I think we're going to start talking about high first round draft picks of bigs from Africa and some of these other new countries that are developing the athletes. So, I mean, it's just going to be a very, very different NBA game. Okay, so we go from that first round. Let's talk about the teams in town, John.
Yeah, the Lakers. I mean, there's been some question marks about their first round pick. What do you think, Lee?
Well, I wrote a one opinion column on my website today, and my opinion was new coach, new playbook, new philosophy. They're going to shoot threes, and they're going to play defense. That's what J.J. Redick's methodology will be. That being said, and they did get a 3-point shooter. They had one Tennessee prior to that, played at small college, Northern Colorado. It's quite a success story. But to me, the burning issue is, did they get the right 3-point shooter? Because the scouting reports that I accessed said, yeah, he can stroke it. He shot 42% in chunks of time with 3 points. And he can shoot as a guy coming off a pick and pull up jumpers, and he can bury stuff from the corners. But he's foot slow. He doesn't play strong defense. He's not a banger. And that's a big issue. If you're going to ask him to play shooting forward, how's he going to get to the basket if these defenders come out and can jump and block his shot? And secondly, the other end of the floor, I mean, if he's slow of foot, how's he going to defend all the quicks that the NBA guys have down on the baseline? So I thought that was a bit of a surprise. They bypassed Tristan Da Silva, who I would have bet my mortgage that he was the guy they're going to take out of Colorado. Da Silva went the next pick after the Lakers passed on him. They passed on Jared McCain. They had a chance to trade up the shooting guard from Duke. And they also had a chance to take Deron Holmes from the University of Dayton. They're also looking for defense, rim protector, physicality. So there's no doubt that KNECHT is a really good player in college, not in the NBA yet. He's got a lot of things to prove. So it is interesting. The national media is of the opinion that his style of French pastry play is going to play well in LA. What about the other end of the court? So I just got huge issues. So we go from that storyline to the second storyline that everybody will be writing and commenting on tonight and into tomorrow. Is Bronny James going to wind up being a Laker at number 55 when they get done with the second round, or somebody jump ahead of them? And where's that story going to go? So, John Riley, you got opinions. Just tell me what you think here about this Dalton Knecht acquisition.
Well, Stephen A. and all those guys are saying the Lakers need a shooter, and they got a shooter. But did J.J. Redick just draft himself in this draft? Is that a comparable guy?
Well, Redick is a guard.
Okay.
And KNECHT is more forward than he is off guard. KNECHT has tremendous sight lines, shooting out of corners and down on the baseline. I watched a lot of him in the tournament. I was pretty impressed. But that's a good phrase. Did JJ take one of his own clones and we'll work with him? But maybe am I in the minority? I don't know. Ask Laker fan to jump on Fans Forum, get in the chat box. He does have to play at the other end of the floor. And what if he's slow of foot and he's not a banger? And he's not a leaper that's going to play above the rim to try to stop guys. Or am I overreacting to that? So somebody who's a Lakers fan jump on board. And John, what's your opinion on Knecht versus somebody else?
Yeah, well, when they picked Knecht, I went, who? Who is this guy? Because I hadn't really heard about him. We was playing at Tennessee, and he was up in one of the Dakotas, D2 for a while. So I don't know. They got boots on the ground. They're looking at these guys. I don't know what to make of this. It's a mystery. Frankly, half the guys that were drafted are playing international or in the Ignite League or something like that. I don't know a lot of them. As I've just been looking at the NCAA players. But so we'll see if this works out. Did the Clippers have a first-round pick? I don't think they did they?
No, they did not. There were a lot of rumors that if a Paul George trade occurred, that they were going to wind up with somebody's number one pick, but that trade has not been consummated yet. That's the next topic we're going to talk about. But the Clippers don't draft until the middle of the second round tonight. And, they've got all types of salary cap issues. They got all types of roster issues. They got all types of personality and distortion issues. So the Clippers story has not been solved nor told yet. It'll happen between now and probably Saturday or Sunday.
All right. Well, you want to move on? You want to talk about JJ Redick?
Yeah, let's talk about coach. Let's just talk about the press conference. Let's talk about what transpired. The whole nation's got reactions to what JJ did. His press conference was quite incisive. There's no doubt that he's intellectual. He believes what he believes, and he's taught it. And obviously, he was recommended by Mike Krzyzewski. But for him to start the press conference, the first question was his reaction to the reaction from LA fans and from the national media that he's not qualified. And the first statement out of his mouth was, I don't give an F what you think about my credentials, whether you're a fan or the media. And boom, that was a flashpoint. Everybody around the country was writing about that. But I'll say this, he was really open. He was really honest with what he said in answering other questions. He said his ego was not bruised. He was not hurt. He was not upset when they interviewed him, and it looked like he was going to get the job. And next thing you know, Dan Hurley is meeting with Jeannie Buss and Rob Pelinka. He said, hey, I'd interview a two-time NCAA champion myself. He shuddered the rumors that LeBron James had any input into this at all. He said he never talked to LeBron James until after the offer had been made. And the Lakers said LeBron was never, ever canvassed by the front office about JJ Redick. He says in terms of the offense, he says LeBron's going to shoot more threes, and LeBron can hit threes. They're going to run stuff to get him open to hit threes. But he said the hub of the offense, they're going to run this offense through Anthony Davis, not LeBron James standing out on the perimeter holding the basketball. He made a statement which I don't quite understand. This roster far off from being a championship roster. What video is he looking at? Because we've looked at 2 to 3 years of Rob Pelinka's acquisitions, and they haven't really done very much over in the big picture of things. In terms of the general manager, quite open about what flipped the light switch on for him. He said that JJ Redick was innovative in virtually everything he does in terms of basketball. He says they're going to reshape the organization based on his philosophy. He said that Redick has a unique perspective of how you teach young players to play what needs to be played. So obviously there's going to be a big learning curve there. He called him an innovator, says he's very forward thinking in terms of what he wants to do with the science of teaching young players. And he says we're just looking forward to what he's going to bring starting immediately. And JJ Redick may coach the Lakers in that summer league team that they're going to put together. Usually you just have assistants come in and the coach sits in the stands with the GM and observes, but they say Redick may put his fingerprints all over everything they're going to do there. The other interesting angle to the hiring of JJ Redick was Stan Van Gundy, who is reportedly about to become maybe the assistant head coach to the Lakers, to be the veteran conscience with the rookie head coach. And of course, Van Gundy coached Redick down in Orlando, and he's got a lot of experience over the course of his career. He says that Redick is going to go through quite a learning curve. He says there will be pregame anxiety with the kid as a head coach, and there'll be postgame torture when they lose because first-year coaches do lose games. He says when Redick was a player, he really took losing very hard. He's indicated there's a long list of things that J.J. Redick is going to have to experience for the first time and is going to have to learn. He says that losing in the NBA for a first-year coach tears you up. He says, the day of decisions will be every day he's a coach as it relates to game plan, teaching, dealing with problems with players, injuries, losses, road trips. He says Redick is about to experience responsibility to be a head coach like he's never, ever experienced before. He closed out the interview, Stan Van Gundy did. He said this guy could be a very, very good coach for a very, very long time. So, John, when you heard J.J. Redick drop an F-bomb with the first question he answered, what did you think? Arrogant or just very confident about who he is and how he intends to operate Laker basketball? And what's your thought to what JJ said, what Pelinka said, and what Stan Van Gundy, with all the miles of experience in his life, said?
Well, I think with JJ, we're understanding this is a different breed of a head coach. He's younger and, he's going to be a lot more candid in his thoughts. And, so I don't know, there's glimpses of JJ that sound interesting, that could work. But do you believe Rob Pelinka when he says they never consulted with LeBron James on who they were going to hire, never talked to him about JJ Redick? I mean, that's a load of malarkey, don't you think?
Well, yeah, I think that's hard to believe, considering the insinuation is that LeBron is the de facto general manager in the locker room and has probably had a lot of influence in the past. I don't know what's truth or fiction. There's probably a little gray area there. But, J.J. Redick says it's going to be his team and we're going to run things that I want to run, and these guys will learn what I'm going to teach them. So, what do you think about Van Gundy saying that this is not going to be easy?
No, I'm sure, but he's been through it as a player. He's seen the coaches go through it. I like the fact that he's super ultra competitive, and if the losses really grind on him, that might actually be a good thing because he's going to demand excellence on the court. So, it's weird that they pick Redick. I mean, I was shocked that he was even considered. But the more I'm hearing, the more I'm like, okay, well, let's give this guy a chance. So we'll see what happens because the Lakers didn't have many other options.
So that's the sum total. You're a Laker fan. Jump on my Lakers line. Get into the chat box, Fans Forum. We want you to join us. We get to halftime here. Our podcast, John Riley, is in our studios in San Diego. I am broadcasting from the St. Lawrence Seaway on the New York-Canadian border. That's what you hear in the background, are barges going up and down the St. Lawrence River from Lake Superior all the way up into Lake Ontario and out. It's amazing, and technology is amazing. We hope you're enjoying what we're trying to do, but at the end of the day, John Riley could co-host from the Guinness Brewery in Dublin, Ireland. I can co-host here on the St. Lawrence Seaway. Our podcast is brought to you by DIXIELINE Lumber and Home Centers, 9 locations to serve you in San Diego. If you've got projects, and John and I have both used them, you got projects at home, we want you to think about the materials. We want you to think about getting them, because these are the people that do a great job helping you make repairs, create some new things at home, in the yard, maybe even at your place of business. DIXIELINE Lumber and Home Center store.
Let's go. Yeah. I'm like an addict, do I gotta have it. I ain't even playing, got a really bad habit. If it moves, gotta grab it, fuse like a magnet. Lose, won't have it till I'm doomed in a casket. I ain't playing, got a weird mind. If you work 8 hours, I'ma work 9. If the shit tastes sour, you should taste mine. I'ma stay in power for a long time. Get up, nah, I ain't a quitter. Toss me the ball, I'm a really big hitter. Big picture, I'm a straight killer. Rising the song to the highest bidder. Got juice, got gas, I'ma move fast. New shoes, new tracks, like who's that? I'm new, come back, better than last. Yeah, it's a new me, never gonna look back. I'm never gonna look back. 'Cause damn, I was built to last.
Our thanks to DIXIELINE Lumber and Home Centers that have been with us from day one on this podcast. Our podcast also brought to you by North County Eye Centers of Poway and Escondido. We all need help with our eyes. Have you ever considered an eye exam? Have you a need for new glasses? Maybe a change in contact lenses? Or is there something much more significant going on? If that's the case, we want you to take your business to the people that we've done business with, North County Eye Center, and right now they are offering every one of our viewers a free eye exam and a discount on frames for your new glasses. Call, make an appointment. Make sure you tell them Hacksaw sent you. Say thank you for being part of Hacksaw's podcast. These are really professional people who know what they're doing. North County Eye Center, Poway and Escondido. Before we start the second half of our podcast today, a reminder, X marks the spot. If you are on X, if you've been actively involved in Twitter, I want you to join my team. I want you to follow me at Hacksaw1090, at Hacksaw1090. We're trying to push to get to 10,000 followers. We're almost there. Join us at Hacksaw1090. You like sports? I write about it every day on my website. There's the address right above me, leehacksawhamilton.com. Check it daily. You'll be amazed at the volume of information that we do provide. And join Hacksaw's Insiders Group. Become a member of our club. We send you out emails with everything that's going on. And subscribe and share, because tell people what we're doing with this podcast Mondays and Thursdays. And you'll also, once you subscribe, you'll get all the alerts every time we put something new on the YouTube channel. And we do that quite often. John, we move into the second half of our Thursday podcast, going a lot of different directions because there are other sports stories that we got to cover.
We got to cover. And here we're talking about the Raiders, and Antonio Pierce. He has some kind of tough personal news here, Lee.
Yeah, he's got issues off the field. He did such a good job taking over the chaos that was Raider football. Obviously, there've been a lot of radical changes. New general manager, they kept the Pierce as the coach, new quarterback, new running backs, etc. He's got problems off the field. It's a big issue. Antonio Pierce is in the middle of a bankruptcy. He has $28 million in debt for business investments. They have attempted to garnish all of his wages. It's almost like he's going to be working for free. $28 million in debt from his heavy investments in 2 auto dealerships. He's not talking about it, but his wife filed the bankruptcy papers just 48 hours ago. That's quite a story. So, you think about coaches and their job responsibility to the organization and their interactions with players and the fact that they work 28 hours a day, 7 days, 8 days, 9 days a week. You never think about what goes on in their personal lives. He's obviously got a real issue here with bad decisions, bad investments, and this story's not going to go away.
Yeah, I mean, this is a tough one. I don't know how you can go through life, with a $28 million bankruptcy thing hanging over your head. I mean, that would just freeze me into a paralysis. It's amazing that he can actually function as a coach. But, I mean, we see this a lot with a lot of athletes and coaches making terrible investment decisions and find themselves in a deep hole.
Yeah, speaking of court proceedings, the other story I'll just mention, jury deliberations have now begun in the NFL antitrust lawsuit, DirecTV, Sunday Ticket, etc. I bet this thing winds up in a hung jury. This is so complicated, and there's so many different angles to the story. And the jury kept going back, asking the judge for clarification on certain things that were announced during the course. Emails and letters. And again, it all spins back. The NFL is of the opinion we have a right to do anything we want with our TV packages. And if we create premium packages, then it's up to the fans to decide if they want to pay the premium price. And they gave rationalization as to why they would not go to single team telecast where you could just subscribe to see the Raiders or things like that. So this lawsuit is now in the jury's hands. It is so complicated, with so many diverse opinions. I bet it winds up in a hung jury, and then we see if this antitrust lawsuit gets retried again. So that's kind of a late-breaking story. It just went to the jury this morning on Thursday. John, we go from that. A couple of other hot topics on the table involving another different type of draft.
Yeah, the NHL draft is coming here. It's going to be in Vegas, Lee.
This is interesting. We talked about the French connection and the French invasion and French Revolution, NBA. Well, the Foreign Legion's about to take over the National Hockey League. Virtually all the top players who are going to get drafted on Friday in the first round come from Russia. We've never, ever seen that before. We've seen Euros. We've seen a lot of really good Scandinavians. We've seen players from the Soviet Iron Curtain countries. But we're talking now at the top of the draft board. It looks as if there's going to be a run on a whole pile of Russian players right from the get-go. San Jose has the number 1 pick, and they're going to take Max Celebrini, the top college player in the country from Boston University. Scored 30-plus goals last season, was the Hobie Baker Award. He's a really fine player. Of course, San Jose is in the middle of a massive rebuild. They're probably going to put maybe the youngest team on the ice in modern-day NHL hockey. Chicago has the 2nd pick, and of course, last year they got Connor Bedard, the great young center iceman, and played him a lot. He was hurt at midseason. They evidently are going to go get a Russian defenseman by the name of Artem Levushanov. He's from Michigan State University. He's a really good hockey player, and he's going to be an instant guy that's going to play at age 19. Anaheim Ducks have the 3rd pick, and they've drafted high in the last group of years in this very, very painful rebuild. It looks as if they're going to take a Russian defenseman, big physical guy, Anton Selyulov. He's going to get drafted. It's interesting. The Ducks have picks 3, 31, and 35. The Ducks, I think, if memory serves me, have a total of 6 picks in the first, I want to say 79 choices. So there's going to be a plethora of players that the Ducks are going to take. It looks as if they're going to take a Russian defenseman. In fact, the theory is right now that of the first 9 picks in the draft on Friday, 5 of them will be Russian, and maybe as many as 7 of them are going to have European ties. So that draft is really interesting. That's hockey item number 1. Hockey item number 2. This is an amazing story that broke this morning. The Edmonton Oilers, who went to Game 7 of the NHL Stanley Cup Finals and were right there with minutes to go and then wound up losing, fired their general manager this morning, announcing Ken Holland is not going to be offered a contract extension. So that comes away as really a shocking story. 3rd item, the story just broke about 12 noon today. The Anaheim Ducks are talking to the Detroit Red Wings about doing what I said they should do. Free goaltender John Gibson. They're talking about trading Gibson to the Detroit Red Wings. They had talked prior to the Ottawa Senators. There had been some conversations over the weekend with the Toronto Maple Leafs, and now Detroit seems to be front and center. Problem is Gibson has had a couple of really bad seasons and a bad set of circumstances with a rebuild team. He's got 3 years, almost $19 million of salary. The Ducks are going to have to pay some of that salary to get the Red Wings to take him. I would hope the Ducks wouldn't stockpile more draft picks. They're so young right now. I would hope that if it's going to be Detroit, that they get some veteran players to stabilize the young guys. And if Gibson is traded, he becomes the 5th goaltender to be traded in the last 2 weeks in the NHL. Boston had dealt Linus Ullmark. He wound up going to Ottawa. Joonas Korpisalo went from Ottawa to Boston as part of the payment. The Kings, of course, traded the Pierre-Luc Dubois deal. They wound up sending him to Washington. They got goaltender Darcy Kemper back in that deal. Calgary shipped Jacob Markstrom. He wound up going to the New Jersey Devils for a number 1 draft pick. So if Gibson gets traded, that's going to be the 5th goaltender moved in the last 2 weeks. So really interesting day coming up in the National Hockey League. With the draft, it starts Friday and obviously goes into Saturday, goes Sunday, but everybody will be paying attention to the group of Russians that might be taking over, invading the NHL with top picks in the draft. John?
Lee, what's your understanding of the history of the NHL and taking Soviet or Russian players? Because I'd imagine there was a time where they weren't allowed to come to America or to North America to play in the NHL. I mean, when did all that change?
Mid-1970s. A couple of Russian players defected in the middle of the night, were smuggled through Belgium and into London, England, and then to Canada. And that's where it started. And at that point, there was no relationship between the NHL and the then Soviet Union. They eventually worked a deal, like a Lend-Lease deal, where players could be drafted at a certain age. But it all started with, there was a big center iceman by the name of Vlad Nedemensky, who jumped to Toronto in the World Hockey Association. And he was the first one that really came and had success and then more defected, and that's what happened. And then that opened the door where suddenly a whole bunch of other Euros saw what was happening with Russian players, and they went to their hockey federations and said, we should have the right to be able to be free and come to the National Hockey League. And then there were agreements that the NHL made with all the different federations, Czechoslovakia, the Latvian countries, then obviously Scandinavia. So, I mean, we have a preponderance of superstars who have come from the European countries. But you just think about that. Under the threat of death, these players left those countries and left their families behind. Just absolutely amazing. And that happened for probably a good 5-year span where guys were defecting and getting helped to get out of the Soviet Union bloc countries to come to the NHL. And then eventually they worked a Lend-Lease deal and the payment transaction deal and things of that nature.
I mean, it's interesting. It's kind of like, Cuban players in baseball. But, one thing I love about all these drafts is how they've turned them into an event. It's a spectacle. So do you think we're going to expect to see the NHL draft being similar to the NBA draft?
Well, the NBA draft this year made it a 2-day draft. First time they've ever done that. The National Football League draft is now a 3-day affair. The NHL, they went to a multi-day presentation about 3 or 4 years ago. So yeah, they've made it an event. They've made it a showcase. They've made it sparkling. This one's going to be in Vegas at the Sphere, starting on Friday afternoon, and it's really become a big event. By the way, speaking of events, let me just throw this number at you, John. NHL Stanley Cup Finals, Game 7, when you were screaming at the TV, Edmonton losing at the last minute to Florida, 7.7 million viewed Game 7 in the U.S. In the U.S.
Wow.
7.8 million viewed it in Canada. That's over 15.5 million viewed Game 7. And the TV ratings for the Stanley Cup Finals, the 7-game series, up 58%. It was just absolutely amazing how suddenly hockey has moved to the front like we've never, ever seen before. So, the NHL right now is in a really good place, almost equally as good as what the NBA playoffs have been. Obviously, what baseball has grown back and bounced back into, though nobody is anywhere near close to what the National Football League does, but 58% increase in TV ratings, all-time record high. That's good for hockey.
Good for hockey, and man, it was Game 7, and these guys are going balls to the wall. Hockey is fantastic. As a newbie fan, I'm loving it. It was a great series, Lee, so I was one of those 15 million or so watching the games.
Okay, here's a question for you, because this is the next topic on the table. Just punch this one up. Which jersey is John Riley going to buy? Because both the LA Kings and the Anaheim Ducks have changed their logos and changed their jerseys for the 2024 season. The Kings have gone back to the Gretzky era. The colors are still black, silver, and white, but they've gone to a new script with the way Kings is laid out in the crest, and they brought back the old crown, which was part of the Roger Vachon, Marcel Dion era from back in the day, the Miracle on Manchester teams. So that's the new look to the LA Kings. Meanwhile, the Ducks are doing something really different. I got a sneak preview early in the week of the video that they were going to present. They're using the phrase line, "This is Orange County," or "Welcome to Orange County." Orange County. Ducks, Orange County. Not like the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim, Arte Moreno trying to be an LA guy. And the Ducks are going back to their original logo, and they've changed the colors of the jerseys. Do you look good in orange? The home jerseys are going to be orange with a new throwback Ducks logo. Road jerseys are going to be white with orange shoulder inlets, orange sleeves. It's kind of snazzy. Now, the only thing is the Ducks have got to get some snazzy players to wear the snazzy jerseys. So, John, you buying a Kings jersey or the Ducks jersey?
Well, the first question I have before I answer the question is that Ducks logo, is that like an alternate, or is that their main logo now?
That's going back to the logo that was part of the expansion team, and that was the logo they wore when they won the Stanley Cup.
Wow. I mean, I like that they're kind of going back to their roots a little bit, and and the whole Orange County marketing strategy, I like that as well. if I had to buy the gear, I'd buy the Kings gear because that's a classic. It's royalty. So I like that logo as well. But I'm just excited that the Ducks are trying to shake it up, be relevant, and I love the merchandising. You know, sometimes people get really upset when teams change their color scheme or change their logo. You know, they want everybody to be like the New York Yankees wearing the conservative old traditional unis. I love it when they change it up, especially when they have 2 or 3 alternates. It just keeps the fans engaged. It's good stuff.
Okay, Hockey Hotline is open. The O Canada group can get on board. You want to talk about this next goaltender trade? Is John Gibson going somewhere else, a.k.a. Detroit? You want to talk about the NHL Draft? You like the throwback things that the Kings are doing with the original crown, what the Ducks have just done, going to the orange jersey, which is really, really different, and the old crest? Feel free, jump on board. Chat box is open for hockey fans. One final topic on the table before we go to Fans Forum, John. Corner kick. Boy, soccer. Holy cow, what a week of upsets.
Yeah, Copa America, man. It's been fantastically. Let's break it down.
Let's start with Team USA. Game 2 in the group play for Greg Berhalter's team tonight. Team USA plays Panama. We saw a very explosive opening win with Team USA getting a very early goal from Christian Pulisic. I've been talking about Fobalagan for months. He had a goal, almost had a second and a third goal. We saw a great play by Gio Reyna. We saw a near goal by Ricardo Pepi. This team looks really different. We'll see now if they can duplicate this. The one difference is Panama bangs. Panama is very physical. Panama's not afraid to take yellow cards. They're going to have to, I think, disrupt Pulisic, etc., for Team USA. Team Mexico is in trouble. I said a week ago I had grave concern that they left 5 veteran, most experienced players off the roster. El Tri did win their first game 1-0, but they got beat by Venezuela in game 2, and now they're in big trouble going towards this next game. It's going to be interesting to see what happens if Mexico does not move into the knockout round. So, you know, Mexico has got a win, got a loss, but Mexico could be in trouble in group play. And I'll tell you, there's some weird stuff that's going on in the Euro Championships. Brazil did not win a game. Did not win its second game. How is that humanly possible? France struggling with Mbappe, finally won a game. Mbappe scored a goal. He has really struggled coming back from the shattered nose and the surgery and the concerns that he had concussions. The Netherlands, who have owned European soccer, finished 3rd in their group. They just snuck in, backed in. And England, under immense criticism, is moving on. England finishes in first place in their group with a win and 2 ties, despite a ton of controversy directed at their coach and controversy involving some of their players and Harry Kane's condemnation of the BBC analyst for criticizing the English side. So, I mean, what's happened in the European Championships has just really, really been weird. And Portugal got beat. Portugal, Ronaldo, and all, they got beat. So, I mean, it's been a first week of turmoil in the Euro Championships on top of what we're going to see tonight. We'll see what happens when Team USA plays Panama and the opportunity. If they get another win, they're going to win that group, and they're going to move on to the knockout round next week, which would be so much fun. John, corner kick me a shot here.
Yeah, well, first of all, I love seeing a lot of these little nations going against the big boys. I mean, Panama against the U.S., it's like a Super Bowl for them, for sure. But I know that Team USA has had battles with Panama. I think they've won some, lost some. It'll be good. It'll be a lot of fun to watch this. But a question I have is, we've got the Gold Cup, the CONCACAF, we've got the Copa America. Are those, like, is one more important than the other?
No, they're important, but they're in different years. Understand this. World Cup is every 4 years. So you have a World Cup in 2026. 2027, you'll have global play. 28, you'll have global tournaments. 29, you'll have global tournaments till you get to the 2030 World Cup. So these are international tournaments. They're not quite in the same esteem of what the World Cup is, but it still matches great teams, great countries against. And sometimes you're also about the Olympics too. So it's a well-put quality play on an annual basis globally. there had been talk about, should we change the World Cup and make it an every 2-year event? It'd be a phenomenal moneymaker, but they've never gone forward. That thing's been discussed back and forth for the last maybe 5 years. That have so much financial impact to all these different countries. I don't want to, John.
Well, you're cutting in and out a little bit there, Lee. So trying to keep up with this. I mean, to me, this is exciting, and I'm assuming the Copa America has got to be, of those off years in between World Cups, got to be one of the top ones because all of our star players are there.
It seems to me program now. We have a different team now, much more in the spotlight now because we have much better talent, which is why now Copa America takes on kind of unique significance. And the fact, John, all these games are being played in the States this year. They're not being played in Chile and Rio de Janeiro or Uruguay. They're being played in the States.
Right on.
Obviously, the television timing of the games.
Yeah, it's I'm going to be wearing out my clicker tonight, going between the draft and the soccer and everything else going on, Lee. But this is terrific. This is a great time in sports right now.
Okay, our podcast is brought to you by DIXIELINE Lumber and Home Center Stores. You got projects; these are the people you should do business with. And by North County Eye Center of Poway and Escondido, offering free vision test for everyone who calls them and says, "Hacksaw sent me up with an eye exam." It's time for Fans Forum. John, as I've been talking to you from the St. Lawrence Seaway, I would imagine you got a few people lined up back in the States that want to talk to.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, you should see these guys lined up. Let's go to Callan. He says, "Damn, Lee, you, me, and John are drowning our sorrows in Molson's and Labatt's. Congratulations to the Panthers on winning it all, though. Any thoughts on McDavid not coming out to accept the Conn Smythe Trophy?"
I think he was just distraught. And now we find out that McDavid had a hip injury, and we find out that Draisaitl had a fractured rib and a wrist injury from a couple of violent slashes. And those guys were still on the ice, taking all the short shifts, etc. It was really, by the time we got to the middle of the third period in Game 7, Edmonton was gassed. And, of course, Florida ran out of gas, too. And Florida spent the whole final 15 minutes just dumping the puck out. And they were on their back heels. And Edmonton, if they had any legs left, might have had a chance to tie that game and force another overtime. But those two teams, they left it on the ice. But, yeah, they're really distraught in Edmonton because they've been building towards this. There's nothing wrong with losing the Stanley Cup final. I mean, they went down to the final 2 minutes before the empty net goal kind of ended the whole thing. I mean, they had a hell of a run, but it is shocking. Holy cow, is it shocking that they fired Ken Holland, the general manager, in the early morning hours today, not offering him a contract extension. But both these players were absolutely wiped out. And Florida right now is partying. That Stanley Cup has been in the ocean. It's been on farms. It's been on the street corners. Every player gets access to the Stanley Cup, takes it home for one day. And every day there's new video surfacing of which player has the cup on behalf of the Florida Panthers and where is he taking that thing to celebrate. It's a cool tradition.
Yeah, I mean, I love that. And I saw one of the players had the Stanley Cup sort of flipped upside down, and he was using it as a bowl with food in it, and he was eating out of it. And I mean, this is terrific, So, but it's weird. You make the Game 7 of the finals, and you get fired as the GM. I mean, you would think that they would want to keep this guy around. What was the reason for firing him? Well,
they've been building towards, as you're breaking up, John, they've been building towards this to get to the Stanley Cup. And we got to win the cup. And they never won the cup. And Holland has made some good acquisitions. He's also blown some deals along the way. I'm a little stunned at this point in time that the ownership would do this right after the Stanley Cup and do it the day before the National Hockey League draft. I don't know if they're going to conduct or whether they're just going to promote from within, but I think in the big picture, Holland built this winner. Now, granted, it took a while to get there, and they had goaltending problems, and they had problems on defense, and then they got to this Stanley Cup and got to the finals, but they had so many guys beat up. So I thought I don't think it was justified, but who knows what goes on behind the scenes in terms of the pressure points of being a Canadian club and you got there and you didn't get it. So somebody pays a price because you didn't win it.
Yeah, well, I mean, Canada's been, how long is their drought now for the nation to win the Stanley Cup?
Montreal was the last one that won it in 1995, and I believe it was the Canadiens beat the LA Kings to win it in 1995. And Edmonton, over 30 years since the greatness of the Messier, Grant Fuhr group.
Wow. Well, let's move on through the list here. Just a quick shot here from Danny. He says, tour stop. It's a shout out to Jim Rome on the road, right by the St. Lawrence Seaway, Lee. I mean, how's the weather out there for you?
It was in my driveway the other day. I told you it was 111 degrees in my driveway the other day. I couldn't believe it. It is 60 degrees, cloud overcast, and it's about to rain. And, I'm a long ways away from San Diego. The St. Lawrence Seaway is just beautiful. But you got 15 minutes to enjoy fall because winter arrives here October the 15th, and they have very short summers. But it's beautiful that you can see the St. Lawrence River and the Seaway right behind me.
Yeah, I think it's terrific. I mean, that you're there. Your Wi-Fi is getting a little sketchy, but sometimes it keeps coming back in and locks in. So I think we'll be able to keep going here. Let's go to Chris. He goes, Saw and John, thanks for reading my take again, showing the world we make a 3-man booth work. Have you, Lee, ever seen anything like we are seeing in Shohei Ohtani, a man amongst boys? The guy is an absolute freak of nature. Is he the greatest talent in MLB history?
Modern day history, John, really. And I think what we have seen this year is so different because remember, when he was with the Angels, he was a designated hitter, but he also had duty as a pitcher. And that meant certain things he could do to prep for his next start, certain things they did not want him to do that would wear him out. So maybe he wasn't a complete batter because he wasn't taking the intense amount of batting practice because he needed to preserve body strength for when he got the ball the next time. I think it's the most marvelous storyline we've seen for 6 years running, him being an everyday DH and then pitching on that 7th day and still putting up the phenomenal statistics. But this year with the Dodgers, he is, John, strictly concentrated on being their designated hitter and not throwing balls, really, doing all the rehab with the elbow. He's done soft toss and some long toss in the outfield. He's not going to play in the field at all, but he is fully concentrated probably 98% of the time on being a designated hitter, studying the pitchers, studying the tapes. Just think about the mental workload he had when he was a 2-position player compared to what he's doing now. And what we're seeing is just absolutely phenomenal. John?
Yeah, I mean, it's been terrific watching him. It's interesting when I watch him swing the bat, it's different than a lot of American players. It's like Ichiro, where he kind of rotates his hips a little bit sooner to get more of that whipping motion. I'm wondering why. Maybe that's the reason he's getting these bombs that go 450 feet.
I've watched him off and on when he was with the Angels. I watched him really closely, starting with the Dodgers this season, and I did not realize his strength in his wrists. If you just look at how quickly he turns on balls and the power in that turn. I mean, this is the greatest modern day player of all time. And if he gets to pitch again next season, then you're going to see this dimension even more because he was a really good pitcher despite having 2 elbow surgeries.
Yeah, unbelievable. Let's go on here. We got to get Super Flea involved. And he says, big fan of Hacksaw back in the day at the Mighty 1090. Dude had a long, impressive career.
We did a lot of things, and we were the first ones through the wall to do it, which is exceptional. And we had great ownership that invested an enormous amount of money in the format. Sports talk radio, the way we did it with all the personalities, is not a cheap format to pay and run. And we did that on top of what we were paying for rights fees and what we were paying because we were a Mexican licensed signal. It was green light go. We did some phenomenal things. It's too bad it changed. The landscape changed. Radio's changed. It's just not the same. But we were the first ones, and that's the most unique thing. I was at the airport, John, last night, getting ready to come up here to the Canadian border, and 3 guys stopped me within the first 5 minutes, and they were standing in line to go through pre-flight check-in, stopped me and said, Hacksaw, We love the podcast. We love what you're doing on Instagram and on Twitter and X and all that. Within first 5 minutes, I thought I was going to miss my flight because I wound up doing a talk show standing in line at the airport. But people like what we're doing, and we're doing it. We're kind of going through this wall like we did on the old days of 690 and 1090.
Yeah, I mean, people love the content. They love you, the history of sports talk. But, Superflea's saying, dude had a long, impressive career. You're still going, man. Keep going, Lee.
On we go. Next one.
Okay, let's go down here to Danny. And he says, the West is out of sight. Let's secure a playoff spot and bounce the Dodgers again. Show me your lightning bolt.
Well, as I said at the onset of today's podcast, Danny, the discouraging thing to me is the Padres have won 7 of their last 8. And obviously Petco Park is a very electric place, and they've gained no ground at all on the Dodgers. I mean, they're still 8.5 games out. And the Dodgers have 3 or 4 games hand on the Padres right now already. And of course, they've still got head-to-head competition. And the Padres are dinged up. What we saw this homestand was really cool. Really cool for these guys because it's postseason such a grind. Really cool for the fans at Petco Park. And as controversial as it was, the dugout incident and the bench clearing incident and the guys yapping at each other and throwing pitches inside and all that, it was pretty electric. Now, can the Padres manufacture this at Fenway Park? Can they do it again when they go into Texas and all this brutal hot weather? That remains to be seen because the jury's still out. They're still an up and down team, and they're dinged up, and that's a piece of the equation. Everybody's got injury problems, and it's not easy to play 162 games, but it'd be cool if they get back into playoffs. Can you imagine freaking Petco Park if the Padres got back into the National League Championship Series? The Padres are playing the Dodgers, and can you imagine what it'd be like? Golly.
Oh, it would be fantastic. And, right now the Padres are tracking better than they did last year with Juan Soto. So we have reason to be a little bit optimistic. It's still early. I just love all the vibes that are going on with the team. It's great stuff. I don't think they're going to catch the Dodgers, though.
Get to the playoffs, but can they get there healthy? That's a big question because right now they got guys that are going to be out for extended periods of time as June flips into July and maybe goes into the 1st of August. Next question, hands for him.
Yeah. Okay, let's go to Angel. He says, Paul George staying in Inglewood, and the Clips should be okay with a healthier Leonard, Harden playing like himself 10 years ago, and George playing like an all-star.
I don't know, Angel, you're wishing and hoping an awful lot here. Story is just breaking this afternoon. Kawhi Leonard, I believe against the hopes of the Clippers, has decided to join the Olympic team. I wouldn't sign off on that. I believe the Clippers asked him not to do this. I know Kawhi wants to play for the flag, but he's had such knee issues over the last 3 to 5 years, and now you're going to go through the rigors of training camp for the Olympics and then go play in these games and then come back and start a regular season. I just don't know that I would go in that direction. So that's a bit of an issue. The Paul George thing, everything that I've been able to gather, I think he's going to opt out, and I think he's going to then be traded. He can opt in and force the trade, and that might be the way this deal gets done. I don't think it's going to be to the New York Knicks because of what the Knicks just did in terms of that monster deal with the Brooklyn Nets. It still might be Philadelphia. It might be Miami because now there's a rumbling out there that Jimmy Butler is going to want to leave Miami. So maybe there's a deal coming in which Butler and Paul George change teams. And there's also Golden State out there because I've heard Golden State might be in the running for Paul George. He played at Fresno State and he's a Northern California type guy in terms of where he came from, although he grew up in Los Angeles. So I just don't know the chemistry to keep him there is right. I was told from somebody that I kind of trust that the Clippers convinced Kawhi to take a 3-year deal. And Kawhi did Paul George to take the same deal and keep this team together. And they worked once all 4 years, max contract guaranteed, and they say no. So I think they're running into a dead there.
Yeah, the Wi-Fi for you is cutting in and out again. So, but we could we're still hanging on. So I think we're okay. Let's just a quick one here from Callan. He wants to know, hey, how close to Niagara Falls are you?
Well, we're trying hard. This is the first time we've done this that we've had a problem. So we've been doing a pretty good podcast with a little bit of lady luck on our side too. Listen, let's close it out this week by just telling you and reminding you, share, subscribe, tell other people what we're doing Mondays and Thursdays. We want you to join our Hacksaws Insiders group. Go to my website, fill out the little orange box. You'll get emails of all alerts of special things we're offering. And of course, we want you to follow me on Twitter, become part of my X team on Twitter. Just sign up at Hacksaw1090. John, this has been fun. Hope you enjoyed the scenery behind me with the barges coming out of Sault Ste. Marie, hauling iron pellets from Lake Superior into Lake Ontario. Tour boats behind me. It's really cool. We're going to try to do another podcast, Monday bonus podcast from my cottage in upstate New York, as I'll be on holiday next week. But there's no holiday cover because we talk about it all the time. John?
Yeah, well, I think when you get to your cabin, you're going to have the Wi-Fi all to yourself rather than sharing it with your whole hotel. So I think it's going to be a lot better when you're there. But we actually, this performed like 95% great all the way through. So I think the listeners and the viewers are going to still enjoy it.
Patient. Hey, for being patient. Through today's podcast brought to you by DIXIELINE Lumber and Home Center Stores, 9 locations to serve you, and by North County Eye Center in Escondido, offering a free vision test. Make sure you call them to set up your free vision test. Tell them Hacksaw sent you. John, enjoy the rest of the NBA. Enjoy the NHL Draft. We'll see what the Padre road trip looks like. We'll be back on Monday. Have a great sports weekend.
Same to you, Lee, and enjoy yourself up there in upstate New York.
And joining us on Hacksaws Headlines.
Join us again for Hacksaws Headlines on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. And find the audio version on your favorite podcast apps. For more content, go to LeeHacksawHamilton.com.